Hello, this video is sponsored by BritBox, the premier streaming service for Britain's most beloved TV shows. I'm Lawrence Brown and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to books, specifically book titles. A long time ago in my childhood, long before I became a YouTube sensation, I came to understand on a basic level that the names and titles assigned to particular media aren't always the same on one side of the pond to the other. My first experience of this phenomenon came in the year 1990, when I was a huge fan of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But that's not what we called it in Britain. We called it Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles because the word ninja was deemed too violent. I'm calm, staying calm. Anyway, after I moved to the United States of America, I learned that name changes like this weren't just reserved for cartoons about sewer-dwelling anthropomorphic reptiles, but also for books. And the first time that I realised this was in Target, when one book in particular posed the following question. That's right, where's Waldo? And virtually everything about this book was familiar to my eyes. After all, as a kid, I'd been obsessed with finding the whereabouts of this bespectacled man in red and white stripes, to the extent that once I'd found him, I'd let everybody know about it as if I was playing Wordle. But there in Target on that one day, there was one thing that was unfamiliar: the name. You see, where I come from, and in fact where the books originated, Waldo isn't called Waldo, he's called Wally. Imagine the irony of being British and trying to find Wally in an American store. It's never going to happen, but why did the name change? Well, American publishers didn't think that the name Wally would resonate with American readers. And on the one hand, I can understand this because in Britain, Wally is a slang term, meaning somebody who's a bit of a space cadet. And since that slang term isn't used here, sure, I can get on board with the American publishers, but the name Wally has been used in the United States as short for Walter, so it just seemed like extra paperwork for no reason. That said, it was at least close to the original name. In Denmark, they went with Holger. Thankfully, the central character in the next book got to keep his name, even if the book didn't. Whether or not you're familiar with P.G. Wodehouse's Jeeves and Wooster novels, you might have heard of some of the things that they influenced, such as the British TV series Jeeves and Wooster starring Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry, the early attempt at an internet search engine, Ask Jeeves, or more likely my own portrayal of Jeeves at the Caxton Community Theatre in Grimsby, England. But the Jeeves books, as well as other entries in the Wodehouse canon, are notable for the fact that they bear different names on either side of the pond, and this all began in 1923 with the inimitable Jeeves. The story of Bertie and his world-famous valet was simply renamed Jeeves in the United States for reasons that I can't work out. Meanwhile, P.G. Wodehouse himself made the trip across the Atlantic and lived out the remaining years of his life in New York as a dual citizen. The only caveat being that he had to change his name to P.G. Whitehouse to suit American audiences. I'm joking. While no British author in history can match P.G. Wodehouse when it comes to transatlantically renamed books, Agatha Christie comes very close. With 25 renamed titles, it's no wonder that Agatha Christie wrote books about mystery, intrigue, and double identity, and perhaps none are more famous than this one. Because when I think of books by Agatha Christie that are set on a train featuring King of the Mustaches Hercule Poirot,
I am a private detective,
I immediately think of Murder on the Orient Express. And when I asked my American wife this morning, she said the same. But that doesn't change the fact that this book, which you might know from the 2017 film version by Kenneth Branagh, was released in America as Murder in the Calais Coach. And you might be thinking, ooh, Lawrence, why did they do that? And the answer is not so simple and contains about as many twists as the book itself. You see, US publishers would have called it Murder on the Orient Express, were it not for the fact that a popular book by the name of Orient Express had already been released in the United States 2 years earlier. But here's the plot twist that you didn't see coming. Orient Express was itself the name that American publishers gave to Stamboul Train by English novelist Graham Greene. Now, American fans of Agatha Christie might also be familiar with another rip-roaring mystery called The Boomerang Clue, known in Britain by its original title, Why Didn't They Ask Evans?
Why didn't they ask Evans?
You were with Mr. Pritchard at the moment of his demise.
Yes.
As chance would have it, the novel is now being brought to life in a star-studded BritBox original. And get this, the amazing 3-part miniseries is directed by the previously mentioned Hugh Laurie. Jeeves and Wooster, starring Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry.
I wish you luck.
You see how I used Agatha-esque foreshadowing to lure you in? Anyway, in addition to Hugh, the show also features Will Poulter, Lucy Boynton,
Exciting.
Emma Thompson, Jim Broadbent,
Never seen him before in my life.
and, much to my surprise, somebody that I myself once acted alongside, Daniel Ings. Hi, Dan. It really is a brilliant blend of humour and suspense with stellar performances, steady direction, and gorgeous shots of the Welsh countryside. And you can start streaming this brand new show today, as well as the best selection of British television on BritBox via your smartphone, tablet, desktop, Chromecast, Apple TV, or Roku device, as well as LG and Samsung smart TVs. Go on, do it. Head to BritBox.com/LostInThePond and use the promo code LostInThePond when signing up for a monthly subscription, and you'll get 50% off your first month. That's half, as in 2 times a quarter. You can see why I'm so into mysteries. It's my unwavering powers of deduction. Anyway, the link is also in my description below. Yes, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, arguably the most famous title change since the British Bulldog beat Bret the Hitman Hart at SummerSlam 92. The first entry in J.K. Rowling's saga about a British bespectacled wizard child, not to be confused with me. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone was famously the name that the Scholastic Corporation gave to what the rest of us know as Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Right, and I should know because I say that as somebody who's read all of the films. The only question is, why did they change it? Well, the publishers wanted a word that would look more overtly magic in the eyes of American readers, right? It was suggested that the word philosopher was arcane or boring, or suggested an old man with a white beard in a room surrounded by books, which is sort of a good description of Dumbledore. So America, is it true? Do you like your titles with more of a wow factor? Should I change the name of my channel to Lost in the Abyss? Let me know in the comments repository below. In addition to labelling me America's finest British import, many, including my mum, just my mum, have made the astute observation that I am sort of like a reverse version of Bill Bryson. But for those of you who don't know, Bill Bryson is an American writer who spent a lot of time in England, and he's written funny books about his experiences. Now, you might be thinking, Lawrence, how did this book make it onto the list? I thought this was about British books. And it is, technically. Firstly, Bryson himself does have dual citizenship between the 2 countries. And secondly, the book in question, I'm a Stranger Here Myself, Notes on Returning to America After 20 Years Away, was first published in the UK under the name Notes from a Big Country. Between 1995 and the year 2000, the English writer Philip Pullman, no relation to America's greatest ever president, wrote the popular fantasy trilogy His Dark Materials. Indeed, fans of the saga will no doubt be familiar with the BBC adaptation from the last few years. And you may remember that the first book in the saga was released as a film in 2007, starring Nicole Kidman. In both Britain and America, the film was released under the name The Golden Compass, which was also the name of the American publication of the book that spawned it. In Britain, it had always been known as Northern Lights. So then what prompted the change? Well, it turns out it was all a terrible mix-up. It is true that Pullman's original name for the trilogy was the Golden Compasses, but in that instance, a compass referred not to a navigational device, but to a pair of golden drafting compasses used by God, because of course. Whereas the US publisher thought it was in reference to an alliothometer that was wielded by one of the characters, and sort of resembled a navigational compass. And so even after Pullman renamed the trilogy His Dark Materials, the US publisher insisted on sticking with the Golden Compass as the name of the first book in the series. Even if you've never read the book The Iron Giant by Ted Hughes, chances are that you've either seen or heard of the 1999 animated film it inspired. The book charts the journey of a gigantic metal man who just sort of goes around destroying the English countryside while snacking on industrial farming equipment. And if that's not rural Britain in a nutshell, then I've been away too long. But the book, released in 1968, didn't go by the name of the Iron Giant back home. Instead, it was called the Iron Man, and you can already see the problem. That's right, only a few years earlier, a little-known publisher by the name of Marvel Comics introduced a character that you might have heard of called Ant-Man, but also Iron Man. And so to avoid confusion, US publishers changed the name of Ted Hughes's book. Now, by this point, it should be lost on absolutely no one that the 1999 Iron Giant was voiced by Vin Diesel, who went on to voice Groot in 2 Avengers films alongside Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, and it's things like that that keep me awake at night. That's it for this episode. Thank you for letting me talk your ear off about books. I'm Lawrence Brown. You can follow me on Twitter at LostInThePondUS, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that my videos don't get lost in the abyss. Thank you as always to my patrons, without whom there wouldn't be a YouTube sensation. If you would like to become a patron of Lost in the Pond, you can do so today at patreon.com/LostInThePond. Until the next video, goodbye.